Welcome back yet again. It's everyone's 8th or so favorite queer candy eggs. In this video, I'm going to be going over how to set up and configure Krita, as well as some general tips for how to get started with the program. Now, there will be a link to the download in the description. Krita is free and open source. Isn't that wonderful? Now, I believe, personally, there's a lot of videos out there going over the best art programs for stuff, what's the best Photoshop thing? Well, after scrounging through a bajillion of those, I have discovered that Krita is, in fact, the best one. It is completely free. It's not a free version where it gets to say it's free and it's not actually free. It's completely free and open source, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And personally, I think it is the single best Photoshop replacement, not just for free programs, but in general. For artists like myself, for example, who at one point, I am technically professionally trained to use Photoshop for school. However, I no longer have access to that because Photoshop and the Adobe programs are ungodly expensive. Nothing's happened on the screen, so I'm just gonna wiggle this around. This background is for a comic I'm working on. I'll do a follow-up with how to do cartooning and layers and clipping masks in a later video, but for now, I'm a bit of a talkative little dork. Don't worry, we're getting to the point. Krita is the best Photoshop replacement for art. Now, I should also specify this video and Krita in general is specifically for people with computers who also have art tablets. Now, if you don't have an art tablet, maybe you don't have enough money for that, there is a very cheap but not free program I have heard very good things about called Procreate. Again, it is not free, but it's only like $10 or something, and it is good for regular, phony tablets and phones. I have heard very great things about Procreate, but this video is not about Procreate. It is about Krita. Now, Krita is better than Photoshop in some ways. in some very specific ways. It is superior to Photoshop regarding art. However, it is not Photoshop, and it lacks a lot of the advanced tools and functionality that makes Photoshop so ungodly expensive. So you're not going to be able to put in a picture that you took and then that Krita won't automatically crop out everything from the background like Photoshop will. Things like that. It can do general things very, very well. And if you have some experience with Photoshop, Krita will be very, very excellent. If you have a lot of experience with Photoshop, it may be a little bit sad, may feel a little bit obtuse at first, but once you get a hang of the workflow, it is epic. Now, the first thing we are going to get into is configuration. Now, configuration and customization is the best aspect of Krita, in my opinion. Let's say hypothetically you have Krita and you have just opened it and you are scared and confused. Or perhaps I have persuaded you already. Well, your setup looks different than mine, and don't worry your little head about that for just a second. I've customized mine to resemble Photoshop because I hate Adobe, but that is what I learned to use for years and years. So if we go ahead and go to the settings, these things on the side, I'm going to go over some professional language just because it makes it easier to describe and understand. And a lot of people's videos do not describe these words, but these are panels. They're panels. And right here is the layers panel. If you pick it up, you can drag it around and place it other places, and then the screen starts flailing around. I keep... Oops. Get back down here. Keep mine right about there. My image appears to have gone wonky. Let's bring back my honkin' layers. These are what are called panels. You've got the layers panel, the brush presets panel, the advanced color selector, which I will show you how to get this, but they can also become little tabs within your panel. So you can have multiple tabs on the same level of panel, and is very, very wonderful, very customizable. I love it very much. So yours doesn't look like this, and you may notice that this is the exact Photoshop color selector. I will show you how to do that. So you're going to want to go up to this top bit, right? You got a lot of things that look kind of scary if you haven't used advanced programs like this before. You're going to want to go to settings. Okay, now you've got a lot of information here, but we're just going to go ahead and hover over Dockers. Now, hovering means that you don't click anything. You just hover over it with your mouse, and you can see all of the panels I currently have available on the screen at all times. You can click these on and off for whatever you need. I normally, when I do animation, yes, this program has animation in it. Superior to Photoshop. Photoshop technically has it, but it's horrible. So I have the advanced color selector, which you see right here, the brush presets, layers, specific color selector, tool options, toolbox. Now, isn't that all fine and dandy? So if you are missing, say, the advanced color selector or the layers or brush presets, or let's say you accidentally hit X and take it away, you can go back up to settings and then Dockers and toggle which ones on and off you want and move them wherever you want. Now, show Dockers, you can also turn them off so that it doesn't show them, but you're going to want to keep that on. If for some reason you click some hotkey by accident and they all disappear, go up to the settings and click show Dockers again. Now, another fantastic thing about Krita is the configure option. So in settings, the first option should be configure Krita with a little ellipses. Now, the ellipses means that if you click on it, it will open a new box. Dockers has the arrow because it brings up a continuation of these options, but if you go to one that has the ellipsis, the 3 dots, if you click it, it will open a new box. Now, there is a lot, and I mean a lot of information on this area. So don't get too scared, but the color selector settings right here, you're not going to want to mess with too much in these advanced settings. You're going to want to keep everything vanilla for now, okay? We're not advanced Minecraft coders, okay? But the color selector, there's multiple different kinds. This one in particular is the Photoshop one, and in my opinion is the best one. I believe this triangle is the base for Krita. I think that is the one that you should have, but you can toggle it to whatever one is your favorite. This one is my favorite. I think it's the best. I think it's wonderful. Now, we don't really need to pay attention to many of these. The pop-up palette is very good for cartooning, but I don't like to use it, so I'm not going to go over it. Now, something very important is the tablet settings. Now, if you are having trouble getting your tablet to connect, there are 2 things you can do. One is in here where you can edit the global pressure curve for your tablet and your tablet's little pen device object, whatever the honk that is. Now, you generally do not want to touch this, but if your pen is finicky, you will want to edit it. Now, it shouldn't be too finicky. There are other nibs, they're called nibs, that it should come with, depending on what brand it is, yada yada, but let's say your dog or your parrot or whatever creature, small baby perhaps, or somebody sat on it or stepped on it, and it's just like lopsided or something, and the pressure is hard to work with, you can edit things pretty specifically in here. And if not in here, then in your specific brushes. I may go over in another video how to customize your own brushes, but now we are just doing general stuff. Now, what we are going to look at now, this is the other thing. If you have your tablet plugged in to your computer and you open Krita, maybe your buttons don't work. That is exactly what happened to me. My buttons didn't work, but technically that's not true. My buttons did work. My buttons just didn't do the right things. And that was quite a headache to get around. Having your tablet, having everything perfectly fine and dandy, and then you get it out and none of the buttons do what they're supposed to do. Well, when I had Photoshop, all of the buttons did exactly what they were supposed to do. And that is what the problem is that the tablet was made to work with Adobe programs, as many things are. Photoshop has very specific keyboard shortcuts. And what does that mean? Well, it means that you can click a key on your keyboard and it will do something. It will click an interaction. Yeah, I could have a key on Photoshop, for example. If you click the B key, B as in B as in blue, it will open the brush tool. Isn't that interesting? Well, let's say the button you had on your tablet was B. It was programmed to mean this is a B press. Well, if I remember correctly at least, Krita does not open the brush tool if you press B. And that is the root of my problem that I had. So you can go in here into these keyboard shortcuts and you can get them for anything you want. It is astounding, but specifically for the main uses are the tools. The tool shortcuts, there they are. Now, you can't exactly fit everything, but all of the tools that you are going to commonly use, you are going to want to create keyboard shortcuts for, and most of mine are the same as in Photoshop. Now I have the color sampler, the eyedropper tool, as the shortcut I, as it should be, because that's just what it is on Photoshop. It's an eye thing. That makes sense. The continuous selection tool, which anyone who uses Photoshop is aware of what the magic wand tool does, and in Photoshop it's W because it's called a magic wand, but here in Krita it is called the it says contiguous. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm not a master of anything, so I'm just gonna believe that. But essentially, this is the magic wand tool in Krita, and I will show that probably in another video about how to do cartooning. We've got cropping for C. I don't normally use this, but sometimes I feel like it. The ellipse tool, you know, it's got stuff. Elliptical selection, don't really use that. Some of these are just the ones that were already in Krita. Here's the brush tool I have set to B, the fill tool set to G, and like you can see with these ellipse tools, Shift and J, you can do combinations of things to do things, like the classic iconic Control Shift S to save as, things like that. The move tool I have set to V. The freehand selection tool sent to L. This is the lasso tool in Photoshop. And as you can see, you can customize this exactly how you want it. And I have customized it to fit the Photoshop keyboard shortcuts that I've gotten used to. And it has been much, much, much easier to transition into Krita from other art programs than anything else. If you are more experienced with phone or regular tablet art programs, it may be very difficult to get used to hotkeys, but my workflow generally is I have my tablet set up on its stand so it's like vertical, and then I sit with my keyboard and my lap so I can hit all the hotkeys with my left hand and use my right hand with a combination of the mouse and my pen. I find that works very well for me. Now, this was my main problem when I first was using Krita, is that my tablet did not work with the buttons. You can also restore defaults if you mess it up too poorly, which is always wonderful. Now, if you are still having problems with your tablet, what you can do is you can go ahead and open the settings of your tablet. My tablet, this Gaumon whatever it is, created a shortcut on the desktop, which is very useful. Yours might not. My other tablet is over here. Don't really use that one anymore. My new one has a screen. As you can see, I have these buttons set up, but my new tablet is so large that I don't actually hold it. It is on a stand. Large tablet, wonderful, definitely worth it. But I don't use these buttons. I just use my keyboard shortcuts because I'm a nerd. But if you want to have your left hand always on this side, it can be very useful. It's just that I don't just do art. I don't just do art. If I just did art, these would be very optimal. But I need more shortcuts than this. So I use my keyboard since I also do graphic design, especially for my comic. Now my pen is lucky enough to have buttons also, so I have the brush and eraser buttons, toggleable, set to my pen. And that is wonderful. And here you can also adjust the pressure in case something is wrong with your pen. Now we are going to go ahead and go over some other things that are very useful for getting started. Well, how do you make a file, first of all? Now you can go ahead and go File in this top corner. You can see the file. Yes. Now we are going to go ahead and create new. So you see new with the ellipsis. That ellipsis means that it will open a new window when we click on this, so that it doesn't jump scare us. So there is a lot in here, and one of my favorite things about Krita is that when you make a custom document, it saves the last custom document you have made, which is very, very useful because I don't like dealing with creating new presets. I just like it to stay what it was before. It also comes with its own presets, not nearly as much as Photoshop, but they are still very good. Now we are going to go ahead and go over some of these options. Now, you have, I do suggest using a custom document every time. Now, first of all, we have the horizontal or vertical, also known as landscape or portrait, or if you want to be extra fun, burger and hot dog style. So we have the width and the height. Height is up and down, width is the other way. Now we have multiple different units that we can work with. Now, pixels is very useful to work with. We have different kinds, millimeters, centimeters, inches. Pica, you are not going to need probably. Pica is for typefaces. I don't really know what this row is. Points is for text size, I believe, but pixels and inches are what we really want to go for. So if you look, it says 1500 by 2550, but if I move it to inches, it is still the same size. It has just been transferred to what it is, and you can see that my file size is 5 inches. Set it both to inches so it doesn't look scary. It is 5 inches by 8.5 inches. And the resolution, very keyly, this is very important. If you haven't been paying very much attention until now, pay attention to this. Resolution is very important, especially if you are going to be posting it somewhere. Like Instagram, for example, I'll probably in my cartooning video show how to post to Instagram without it destroying the quality of your art, which is very possible despite what a lot of people think. Resolution, if you want to print your thing. If you want to print it at any time, do resolution 300 pixels per inch. That is how most printers work. Fancy printers, expensive printers, professional printers can go higher than that, but chances are if you have a printer at home, it can only do 300 ppi. Now, that's pixels per inch, which is why I have it set in inches. If you are going to print at home, you may want to do the 8.5 by 11 standard printing paper, at least in the United States. That's what it is. I don't work at Dunder Mifflin. I don't know any other paper sizes. But if you do that, you want to be sure to have a border around your image because, as you can imagine, your home printer and any printer cannot print past the edges. You need to have space for the bleed of the ink, and you need to have space just for the edge of the paper. However, if you do not want to print, if you are working specifically in digital, you are going to want to have 72 pixels per inch. Now, before I say that too confidently, let me make sure. Yes, 72 pixels per inch. 72 is the standard for digital. So you will start to see that If you are using print, you basically want inches and 300 pixels per inch. If you are doing digital, exclusively digital, you are going to want 72 pixels per inch and then work in pixels. Because if you work in inches at 72 pixels per inch, you start to get absurdly large canvases. Now that is all very fine and dandy, but then you get down here and you start to see some horrifying messages. Now, what color mode are we using? So even though I normally use this for comics, which I intend to print, I do keep it in RGB, which is red, green, blue, which is for digital. This is because of what is called a color gamut. Now, a gamut is the color range. That doesn't make sense at first, but what is important to remember, this RGB, this is for digital. So its color range, because it is made of flashy, beautiful lights in your computer screen, it can make brighter colors than print can because your screen uses light and print uses ink. So red, green, blue color mode, color space, is larger than CMYK. CMYK is for print, as CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black is represented by a K. Yes, don't question that too hard. CMYK is for print. You can use it for digital because RGB is bigger than CMYK. CMYK fits inside of RGB. I use RGB, and then just because my comics, I post them online and I plan to print them, I do them in RGB because it's a larger color space, and then I can compress them down to make them printable. This does change certain things, especially gradients are susceptible to being compressed and looking odd, but because of my art style and how simplistic and round it is, and the fact that I use solid colors very often, it does not matter too much. So it's not going to be the end of the world if you use RGB instead of CMYK, but if you are a very big fan of very, very vivid and bright colors, just know that if you use RGB and make those bright colors, when you print it, it will not look the same. If you are very specific about colors and you want to print it, always use CMYK. If you're not, you can use RGB. We don't need to look at these other ones. These are the main ones. And then grayscale, it just means there is no color. This is for if you want to print a comic, for example, using only black ink. If you want to use, so what are they called? Halftones, for example. You would want to do grayscale, because if you use CMYK and you print an image just by using black and white colors, there will be other kinds of ink being used. And that is fine. Now you may notice it says /alpha. Well, what does that mean? Alpha is a channel. All of these colors, the red, green, and blue, are all different channels. Okay, and the alpha is another channel. The alpha is transparency. Yes, alpha channels are transparency, and that is a very important thing to remember. The depth, the bit rate, just leave it. Just leave the bit rate, just leave it. The profile is fine, just leave it. Don't pay too much attention to that, it'll hurt your brain. You don't need to change the bit rate higher than 8. You might think, oh, 16, 32, that seems amazing. Just keep it at 8. It will keep your file size low. You don't need to do it higher than that. It's fine. Now, going back to those channels, the color channels. Here we are. Here they are. Here's the color channels. Here's the red channel, the green channel, and then the blue channel. And then the alpha channel is the nothingness. It is the void. Now, in mine, I have a white background, but this is the alpha channel. This is the alpha channel. The blankness, the nothingness behind it, that is the alpha channel. Oops, I actually wanted to create a new file so that we can talk about something else. So here's my new file. Now, very important information for starting up, how to save. So when you have a file like this, we want to go to File, Save As, or you can use those hotkeys, those epic hotkeys for Save As. You don't want to hit Save first. You want to do Save As first. You do Save As whenever you want to create something new. You use Save when you have already used Save As. So we're going to hit Save As, and you can tell that it is going to open a new box because it has this ellipsis. Now, what do we have? What options are there? Well, this seems kind of alarming, but don't worry, we don't need most of these. If you want to continue editing your file, you're going to want to turn it into a Krita document, a Krita working file, a .kra. This is the file you want it to be if you are not done with your image and you want to keep editing it later. You want to keep all of your layers and everything intact. Now we can go ahead and skip most of these. Here's GIF, the .gif. You can use this for animations, which I may make a video on, but GIFs do not contain sound, and they are heavily compressed. It is not a video, it is an image. Isn't that interesting? We can go ahead and skip these. Then we get to JPEG, the JPEG, or JPG, whatever the honk it is. Now, important information about JPEGs. This is why things like Facebook, Instagram, everything destroys your image quality. Because a JPEG is very, very compressed, especially with the colors. It turns pixels that are similar enough in color to the same color. It gets rid of your alpha channel, very importantly. That's why when you Google, oh, I want to Google a picture of Volcarona, a picture of Volcarona with transparency, and it'll often be like, oh, search PNG with transparency. The reason that it's not transparent is either that they made the PNG poorly they didn't save the alpha channel on the PNG, or they turned it into a JPEG, which gets rid of the alpha channel, which means that it gets rid of the transparency. So JPEG does not have transparency. That is very important to remember. If your image requires transparency, do not save it as a JPEG, save it as a PNG. PNG is still compressed, but not nearly as compressed as a JPEG. It is the go-to for saving your images, especially your art, and it retains an alpha channel if you want it to. That is amazing. You want that alpha channel so you can have a picture without a background, with that clear background. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful. And the last one that we are going to be talking about that is particularly useful, many of these are used for digital shenanigans and websites, but you may see here Photoshop image. What? This isn't involved with Adobe, a .psd, that's a Photoshop working file. Yes, Krita can work with, open, and save as a Photoshop document. Isn't that amazing? The file I am currently looking at was originally, not this one, this was originally a Photoshop document, and I have converted it into a Krita document, and that is absolutely amazing. So I randomly, without telling me in advance, my school canceled my ability to log into Adobe programs, and I was very sad, but Krita allowed me to open all of my files again and restore them as a new type of working file in Krita. And that is fantastic. It's amazing. I was very upset that I lost all of my graphic design for my Fakeamon project, Candy Eggs Fakeamon on Instagram, Pog. And it restored it. It's beautiful. I love Krita. It is amazing. But I should tell you, it is not perfect, as it is not official. When you open Photoshop files or you convert Photoshop files to Krita files and what have you, there are some things that go wrong. And that is specifically, it messes up clipping masks and layer effects. Now, what is a clipping mask? Real quick, if you don't know what a clipping mask is, it is basically, you have a picture, for example. Let's say I'm looking at this Tarbosaurus Batar. Fun fact, Batar in Tarbosaurus' name is technically spelled wrong. It is an English written version of a different language, but the typical way to spell it and the way that it was spelled in different documents on that expedition was Baatar. And in Tarbosaurus's description, it was spelled the other way around, and I think that's very interesting. Anyways, let's say we want to put shading on this Tarbosaurus, but we don't want to spend time erasing around the edges. Well, on the color for the Tarbosaurus, we could create what is called a clipping mask. And a clipping mask would allow me to draw. Let's go ahead and get out the brush tool. We make the size really big. If I wanted to shade this entire thing blue, for example, I could just color over this entire thing, but the clipping mask around the color would allow me to not color outside the lines. It would only color where this layer's color is. That is what a clipping mask is, and when you transform things from Photoshop to Krita, it breaks those, but it is very easy to fix. Krita just has some very specific things you need to do to make clipping masks work, which I will go over in another video. And it also messes up layer effects, which is not very easy to restore, honestly. Oh, and very keyly, it also rasterizes text. Now, what is rasterization? Well, rasterization is when I scroll in, see how it's made of pixels? I sounded very concerned for a second. See how this is made of pixels? That is a raster. That means it is this big, and if I make it bigger than this, it will attempt to reconstruct it smoother, but it never looks right. Compared to vector, which is not what this is. I'm seeing some accidental mixed pixels up scrolling up this far. But raster is what the brush is. Text is not raster. Text is vector in Photoshop, which means that you can resize it and it won't be made out of pixels until you finish your image. But when you move the text, or when you move a Photoshop document into Krita, it compresses that, it rasterizes it, so you can no longer edit it, but you can still put your own new text. And that is how I restored all my graphic design files that needed to be editable. It took a bit, but it was way better than just not having access to it anymore. But another good thing about Krita in relation to Photoshop is that it contains blending modes. What is a blending mode? If you ever hear people complain that digital art is too easy, it is because of blending modes. So you see this layer, for example, is set on normal. That is just regular. Here are the blending modes. You may notice, if you are a fan of Photoshop, I can speak, that these are all the ones from Photoshop, because I selected the ones to have good, easy access to be the Photoshop ones, because I like those ones the best. If you want to use shading, multiply is good. If you want to do dark shading and light shading, overlay is good. Things like that, of that manner, you can use them to blend together. I won't get into it now, as this is not an art thing. This is an introductory video. It contains blend modes, specifically the ones in Photoshop. So if you already are familiar with the Photoshop blend modes, you got it down. I believe that is everything I wanted to go over in this introductory video. If you have any questions, I may be able to help. I may not. I'm not exactly a computer guru, not exactly a computing wizard, but I believe, you know what? I believe that this has been Candy Eggs, everyone's 8th or so favorite queer. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully I have persuaded you to use Krita, because it is frankly very nice. And I will probably make a follow-up on this on how to optimally use layers and clipping masks in regards to cartooning and also blending modes and all that things. Isn't that wonderful? Now I'm just going to scroll in real close into the Cosmoceratops while saying bye. Thank you for showing up. If you're interested in random... There is missing pixels again. This is the problem with raster, but, you know, I choose to work with low weight files that don't take up very much space, so I don't have very much pixels to work with, but that's fine. It's just how I do. This has been Candy Eggs. Thank you very much. Use Krita. It's great. Link in description on how to get it. It's wonderful. Hopefully nobody has any horrible problems that can't be solved with their tablets. And thank you very much. Please subscribe and hit the like button and all that jazz. Here's my OBS. Bye bye.